As people asked me about it before, we're now recording so that we will have this saved for later reference because some other folks have asked. So this session is being recorded now. All right, let's switch back to the PowerPoint just to set the stage here a little bit. So we're going to get into users and user types. And as we start, let me frame this by saying that user types are designed and intended to give people access to the information they need access to, get them the permissions to be able to do the work they need to do, and then beyond that, just get out of the way. You shouldn't be blocked by a user type, preventing you from doing something that you ordinarily would do. Now, having said that, this is one of those things that as we work together through the early days of the system, there have been changes, more permissions granted, new user types being created. This is a little bit of a work in progress to get all of this just the way we need it, and we appreciate you collaborating with us on that. Right now, the set of user types that are available to you are available in the system are listed down here, and this chart illustrates the user types that are really specifically designed for APSEPs as an organization. So that would be aggregate provider, that's probably a lot of your staff. APSEP aggregate administrator certifier, this is the user type that I'm impersonating now, and many of you probably are. And then APSEP IT administrator. And these are designed specifically because they need to be aggregate users. So I want to speak a little bit to what we're talking about when we mean aggregate users. An aggregate user is somebody who logs into CT-SEDS at the top level of the hierarchy, where the first step is that you see the districts or the sites, the subsites that you have access to. And it's an account that for the time being, controlling that account, resetting passwords, assigning people to new districts and that sort of thing is being done by either the department or PCG staff. Now, that's not something that we want to hold on to forever. It's something we're working right now with our engineers to get you the ability to manage your own staff. It's probably going to take a little time before we can do that, but the idea is, again, making sure that the data is protected, that you only have access to what you're supposed to have access to, and you're able to manage your staff at that level. So for the time being, if you need to add new staff, you need to submit that staff member's name using the aggregate or the multi-district user form that's available right on the front page. And let me show everybody where that's at if you haven't seen it. So on the right-hand side of the page is the announcements section, and down near the bottom of the announcements should be an announcement about the multi-district user request form. It's been updated, I think, on your sites, but that link would take you straight to the form and you'd be able to make that request. If you need to request to inactivate a user, so somebody's not working on your team anymore or has moved on or for whatever reason, that can be done just through a simple help desk ticket. So send a help desk ticket, tell us the user's name, tell us they need to be inactivated, and we'll do that. Just so you know, that doesn't delete everything about them. If they come back to your employee, we can reactivate them pretty quickly and they'll be back in. And then the last one about this that's, a pain point at the moment, but we're working to get it to a place where you all can manage this too, is user passwords. The password for your users needs to be set at the aggregate level. And because of that, we need you for right now to be sending in a ticket to ask us to reset that password. And we're prioritizing those and trying to do them as quickly as they come in. One thing that I want to point out, and I know there's some urgency around getting passwords reset, try not to send it through multiple different channels, because what we have occasionally seen is, somebody on the help desk picks it up, resets the password, and then somebody else comes and resets the password again, and that causes some frustration for users who keep having to log in with a new password and reset the password multiple times. So one ticket, and we'll turn that around as quick as we can. All right, let's get into permissions. So if you had a chance to download that document that I pointed out before, the first tab is going to look like this. What you've got in that workbook is a set of pages that describe various kinds of permissions that exist in the system. And what we're looking at right here are all the user types down the left-hand side. We've highlighted those that apply for our discussion today. And then across the top, you can see various permissions that people have within the system. And this is pretty useful to understand, for instance, about who can finalize an IEP and who cannot. And we'll talk about this as we move along here today, about finalizing documents, creating drafts of documents, what that means in practice, and we'll get into some deep detail around that. The other one that I want to point out here is this associated to all grades. Now you can see most all of the users, well, actually not most, all of this current user set can or is associated to all grades. That's an important concept to think about, because as we move along here, another level of association is being associated to school buildings. Some users in the system are associated to all schools within a site, and your users are not. Your users need to have school association set, and we'll talk about that in pretty good detail. Before I move on to the next screen, I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. I'm going to let you sort of digest this slide a little bit in the details, and then we'll move on to the next set of permissions. Okay, we're going to shift gears. Same list of user types on the left, but now what we're looking at are documents. And these are not all the documents that are in the system, but some of the main core ones that probably are those that you need to deal with most frequently. You can see down the column whether or not people have the ability to create drafts or finals. And this is what I was speaking about just a little bit ago. Most of your users have the ability to contribute to and create drafts of many of the documents. Some of your users, well, actually, for some of the documents, you can create a final of those documents. All right. The last column over here is an important one to note. This is about being able to access and view documents on the document page. This is sort of like the student's cumulative folder. Every document that's generated in CT-SEDS and documents that have been uploaded from legacy systems are available on this page. And you can see that your users have access to get to those documents. Generally, with the exception of the IT administrator, they don't need to get to that kind of information. All right. The next tab discusses a user's ability to view students. Now, there's a difference between searching for a student and returning results and being able to see a group of student names and then clicking into that student record and accessing things like the IEP module, the 504 module, getting to the student's documents page, those sorts of things. You can see that if we look at the aggregate provider, the first step of association is that the aggregate provider will need to be associated to their assigned schools. And very simply said, the system needs to know that the student and the provider work and exist in the same building before that provider can see them. And I'm going to sort of demonstrate that in great detail when we get into the system in a moment. The other part about this is that the provider can't really do much with that student until the student is on their caseload. In other words, from the student perspective, this person is a member of their team and has a right to come in and do work with them. So those two levels of access need to be set for most of your users. You can see that for my user type that we're going to be demonstrating today, they can see all the students in their associated schools and can get in all the modules even when not on the team. And then the last slide is about administrative functions. And you can see that and Georgette made a great point in clarifying this the other day. This is not being an administrator of a school, but this is administering things within CT-SEDS. So most of the users up here at the top are folks that don't need to have those kinds of functionality, but it's a little bit small to see. What we're talking about here is manually adding new students, editing information on the student information page, editing the OSEP district on the student information page, and you can see that not very many people can do many of those kinds of things. However, some of your folks can do some of these administrative functions. All right. Let me just check my notes here for a moment and see if I want to jump into the system. Yeah, let's do that. Well, actually, before I jump into the system, are there any questions in the chat about users and permissions that I can speak to as we head into the system? Again, are you seeing anything that we should speak about?
The only question had to do, so actually we've got a couple, but the first question that I was trying to answer in the chat was about why more than one staff person can't be on the same edit screen at the same time. So I was trying to kind of clarify where different staff can be kind of working on the student record, but not on the exact same edit screen at the exact same time.
Yeah, I'll try and talk to that as we move along through the system today. That is a difference from other systems that people may have worked with before. And we have added some things to hopefully, put more information on the screen so people know how to collaborate there, but they shouldn't get in their each other's way too much. All right.
Rob, I think the second question that we have in the chat is probably one we do want to address because it's probably a typical question that many APSEPs have, and some have asked it in previous sessions this week. So the question is, if they do not currently have an APSEP administrator certifier, I think the question is, what implications does that have for the system? So I think that's a very important question, because I know this addresses the issue of transitions from one leader to another leader and what that means for CT-SEDS. The other question I think you addressed, but you might want to just go over, is what kind of help they can get setting up new employees or inactive old employees. I'm not quite sure what inactive old employees means, Tanya, so maybe you can clarify that. And I think the final piece of this is training new staff on the system. So those are kind of what I can parse out of the question. Yeah.
So just real quick, if we've got users that we need to add that weren't in the initial upload of staff, maybe they're new staff members, completing that form is the way to get that multi-district user on there. So one of the things that I want to sort of make plain about that, there was an initial rush at the start of the system where lots of people all of a sudden needed to add lots of staff, and it took a while to get caught up. But the speed that we're able to add these folks has greatly increased over the last couple of weeks, and the turnaround time on getting a new staff member into the system is now days as opposed to weeks, and that's good, and we're working to get it faster. And again, we're also working so that this isn't something that you have to do through this form. Someday in the not too distant future, you should be able to manage your staff and add them at that aggregate level too. But for right now, the avenue is, if you need to add, and I'll add, if you need to change someone's user type, it probably, well, it could be done through the multi-district user form. If it's just one person that you need to deal with, then it's probably easiest just to submit a help desk ticket, and I'll show exactly where that is in a second. But that would be for inactivating a user. Just tell us the user's name, what school they work at, and who you are, and we'll go ahead and inactivate that user. Similarly, if you need to reactivate that user, say I had somebody who we inactivated because they left, but now they're back, we can go in and pretty quickly reactivate them. And again, the reason for this is because your users have access to multiple different sites. So it can't just be done on one site. It needs to be done at that top aggregate level across all sites to make sure everything goes correctly that way. In terms of where those things are, I'll just point it out again, that you access the multi-district form from down here at the bottom. This is for getting new access for new users and that sort of thing. And if it's just modifying a user's account, that would just be clicking the envelope up here to send us a message, and that will go straight to the help desk, and we're prioritizing those kinds of things like fixing user passwords or just things that we can do real quick. We've got a lot of staff that are working on that right now. Okay. Anything else before we jump into looking specifically at a user here?
One more question. It seems that Tanya is not an APSEP certifier. So she can't put in a help desk ticket for some of the things that need to happen for some of the users and the staff in her location. So I'm not sure how we would want to address that.
Yeah, it sounds like
or anybody else that may be in that similar.
I'm sorry, this is Tanya. It's just I can't type that fast. There's nobody in our building who's APSEP certifier. Our principal was, he left. We have a new principal. We also have new staff members. That's basically and we can't, I was told when I tried to get access to changing the name, whatever, through the help desk, that in order for me to do it, I have to have an APSEP certifier in the building. We don't have one.
Got it. All right. So in that case, I think what we need to do is we make sure we've got your name. We will connect with you and get that straightened out this afternoon, right after the session. Is there anybody else that's in that boat? You can just put your names in the chat. And
Rob, I
we'll
am aware of others that are in that same situation, and some have reached out to CSDE for help. Laura is also involved in some of those situations. And what we're recommending is that someone other than the either ed director or the principal, depending on what titles you all use, such as like the executive director, also have the designation in the event of that kind of turnover, so that someone can then make the request to authorize a new person to be assigned that user type when they are hired. So I think it's important, especially for APSEPs, given some of the unfortunate turnover that does go on, that you do have two APSEP administrators available at any given time, as one as a backup.
Yeah, that will be important. And basically everything that I'm about to demonstrate today is capability that APSEP administrators would need to do to sort of manage and support staff. So that's going to be really important. If you are in that situation, please, put your name in the chat, let us know, and we'll try and help work through that and get it going today so that you don't stay stuck. All right, so let's look at how we manage a user's account. To get to users, what I do is I click admin and then users. Now, on this user search page, a couple of things are going on that just for general awareness might be really useful. The first thing is that I can search for users by school. Now, the user that I'm going to be working with today is a user named Martin Martins. And let's imagine for a little bit that my school is the Connecticut Public School. So this is the same sort of scenario that you have within your sites. You go into a district site and you go to search users, you're going to be able to see users from your assigned school. That's why this list is kind of short, that my user doesn't have access to every school in the district, just these couple. If I want to search for people who are aggregate providers, because I'm looking for, Martin is a therapist and I want to work with him, and I click view users, you're going to see that I don't see Martin when I look for users that are assigned to my school. That is probably because Martin doesn't have a school association yet. And I can show you that by clicking on users again, go back to the search page. I'm going to leave this to all schools that I have access to. And I'm going to click aggregate provider, conduct the same search. And here's my roster of the people who are assigned to that school and also aren't assigned to schools. So this issue right here with Martin not being assigned to school causes a couple of different problems throughout the system that I'll just quickly run through. He doesn't show up in the search when I look for people who are staff from my school. He wouldn't show up on the search when I'm trying to add team members to a student's team. He wouldn't be able, if he logged in, to search and see any students, because remember, we said that he can only see students if he's associated to school. So this is going to be important that we address this for him. And it is the thing that would happen for any new users that get added for you. Our staff will give them access to the district sites that they need access to, but they won't assign them to the schools. So you'll have to assign them to the schools as you administer them. All right, so you'd click into Martin's name and wait just a second, and you'll see that at the top of the screen, I can edit his first name, last name, add a middle or suffix as I need to do. These are all clickable for me. And just so you know, you're only really editing it on this particular site, but you can make changes there. You'll see that you cannot change the email address. And the reason for that is because that's how users log into the system. If there's a typo there or something along those lines, let us know using that help desk ticket or replying to the message that confirmed the new account that there's a change that needs to be made. And we can go ahead and address that and get it corrected so that the user can log in correctly. The next thing I want to point out to you is this big list of district names that are here. And I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm also going to zoom in a bunch so that we can see what it is. This field of districts is for APSEP districts. And what it does in the system is this works as making a connection between LEA staff and the students that they're responsible for when they're outplaced from their districts. Now, that's really important to understand. Essentially, what it means is if I check one of the districts on this list, that means Martin is only ever going to see students whose APSEP lines up with that district. So if I click Danbury, he will only ever see Danbury students and no other students. Now, that should make you think that, wait a minute, we don't want any of our users to have any of those checked. So for all of your staff in every site, no one should have any of these buttons checked, because that will prevent them from seeing probably most of your students. What you want to see is every student that's in your school, regardless of whose APSEP they come from. So do not use those filters. Scrolling down a little bit more, you can see a couple of more fields. It looks as though you can change the password here, and I just want to caution you that we are on a local site. If you were to change this password, it would only change Martin's connection to this site and would fog up his account at that aggregate where he's got access to multiple districts. So as much as it's tempting to do that, do not change the password here, because as you recall, your staff are aggregate users and this password is only for that local site. These sections are about contact information. And I would encourage people to put information in here, like your title, your work address, and that sort of thing. For some of you, if you are the person who's producing a meeting notice, your contact information is probably going to be populated. And this is where it would come from. Just so you know, we have not programmed and will not be programming home phone into anybody's documents, and you don't need to put that in the system at all. Just use the work phone field. That's the one that would show up if somebody's looking for your contact information. And then scrolling down a little bit lower, you can see where I've got access to the provider type And again, we don't want to change his provider type on this local level because it's only going to change it on this one site. And then at the bottom is where our school associations are. Now, I've only got a couple of schools here. You might see a longer list of schools when you first go in, depending on how your account is set up. But this is the problem with that Martin needs resolved. So I give him access to the school that I want him, that I know he's working in. And then I would click update the database. And confirm down at the bottom that he is certainly associated that school. And I can sort of check that by running that test that I did before. Let's look for staff in my school who are aggregate providers, and he should now show up on our list like everybody else. Now, before I go too much further on this, let's look at the output for the list. One of the things that's handy about the user search, looking at it this way, if I look for a roster of students, first off is I have a column that shows me the last time any of these people logged in. This could be really helpful for understanding who's using the system and how often they're using the system. Over on this side, you'll see these pretty little pie charts. These are not Christmas ornaments, even though they're red and green. What these are a sort of a dynamic display of the compliance status of the students that are on a user's caseload. If I wanted to see Roosevelt's caseload, for instance, I can click right there. And I'm going to see the roster of students that he is either a case manager of or just a member of the team. So his name doesn't appear there under case manager. Clicking back, you can see that there's a column here about students. The first column is the number of cases where he is a case manager, or I'm sorry, yeah, case manager, and then 35 are the number of students that he's on a team. And I think with my data, it might be a little jumbled up since I'm on a training site. His list didn't look that long, but importantly, you can see that Martin doesn't have anybody on his team at the moment, or he's not on any students' team. He has no caseload at the moment. So we're going to start to head that direction. Let me just make sure. Yeah. Before I add him to a caseload, I want to jump back to our slides for a moment just to sort of hit a couple of key points about users, skip through that, to make sure that we've all internalized the sort of what's going on with users and troubleshooting a couple of really common help desk questions that we've seen quite a lot of. So one of the most common things is I can't see or I can't find my students. For the user types that we've been discussing today, it's really important that those folks are in the system and the students are also in the system. So being able to verify that they both have active accounts and then checking to make sure that the user is associated to the school where the student is. And that applies to all three user types in your context: the aggregate provider, the APSEP aggregate administrator, and the APSEP IT administrator. If a user says, it's sort of a refined version of I can't see my students, I can see my student, but I can't do any work with my student. I can't get to the IEP. I can't see the IEP. I can't do all these kinds of things. That's because the user is not yet, doesn't have the student on their caseload yet, or vice versa. The student doesn't have the user on their team yet. Once that relationship is established, then they'll be able to get into the IEP, view the documents, and that sort of thing. That applies to both aggregate providers and APSEP aggregate administrator certifiers for some sections. So it's important that we understand how that works. Now, as I go to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you how an administrator can add Martin to a student's team. But there is a tool in the system called the Caseload Admin Wizard, and there's a quick guide that describes how you as an administrator could set up a user's whole caseload, add them to many students at one time, pretty quickly set them up. There's also a way, and your aggregate providers can do this, they can manage their own caseloads. Using the Caseload Wizard, they can search for students add themselves as a team member as necessary, and then they have access. So this is something that you wouldn't necessarily have to manage for every user. They can do it themselves too. All right, so let's go back into the system and sort of speak to that and get to how we do it. So I've set up Martin, he's ready to go. I'm going to go back home, and I can click either home or CT-SEDS. I'll click the CT-SEDS to get started. And the scenario I'm going to work with is that I want to set Martin up on a particular student's team. So to search for students, I click on students, and it takes me to the student search page. A couple of quick things about that. For those users that have a caseload, you'll have a button right here that says view my caseload. If you've already set that up, click that button, and you're going to get a roster of students who are on your caseload. I'll go back for a second because I want to sort of speak to the search a little bit more. You can search for students very specifically by SACID or last name, and also you could search for students in your school. So this becomes one of those things that is a pretty quick and easy reporting tool. If I wanted to look at all my students in my school who have an IEP, I would choose the school, choose IEP, and when I click the search results, that's the roster of students I'm going to get. If I wanted to look at all of my students who were coming due for an IEP soon, I could click my school from the list and then come down and click all my students who are in warning status. Or, and I know in my demo site, there's a lot of students that fall into this category, students who are overdue for their IEP. So with that, let me go ahead and click View Students. And now I have a roster of all my students who are overdue for their IEPs. Let me zoom in so we can see the headers here real quick. So IEP information is kind of right in the middle of the screen for you. So here's Randy Adams. He was eligible on October 17th. He's got a projected eligibility 3 years later, and he has a projected IEP that should have been in place on the 12th of December, and it looks like that hasn't happened. If his IEP was finalized and in the system, it would have an IEP begin date and IEP end date. His case manager is here, and maybe that's the problem, that he doesn't have a case manager at the moment. And then over to the right, you can see the 504 information. So on every search result, you're going to get IEP information in the middle, case manager, and then also 504 information over to the right. On these results, you can export this roster to Excel and take it with you and do whatever you want to do with it. You could also click print results. This will give you a PDF of this roster so that you can take it and work with it that way if you're like me and like to just highlight things and do it offline old school. The symbols over here are compliance symbols, and if I hover over it, you can see that the red symbols are telling me that this student is eligible for an IEP but is now past due. So it really helps to understand what's going on. Top symbol is IEP, second symbol is 504, and you can see this yellow 504 means he's coming due soon. It's not up yet, and I'm going to probably, or something else needs to be addressed. Looks like he's missing a disability or something. But yellow generally means something is coming due soon. A clear button would mean this student is not involved in that process, 504 or special ed at all. And I don't think I have any, oh, there's one. A green symbol means everything's compliant and that's running along just fine. And if you hover over it, it tells you more specifically about what it is that's compliant. Okay. So searching for students, pretty easy to do. One of the things that is really useful too, after you've worked with the system for a little while, is this recent students button. If I click recent students, this takes me to the roster of kids that I've recently done work with. And it is organized and sorted, looks very similar to last search results, but I have a new column here about the last time I accessed them. The most recent kid I worked with is at the top of the list, and it goes down from there. Your list might be pretty long. So today what I want to do is work with Nicole and get Martin onto her team so that he can start providing services. So here's Nicole's record. I jump in and I'm on her student information page. This sort of shows all of her demographic information, and specifically what I want to do is get Martin onto her team. So under school info, I have access to the personal information page. That's where I am now. And then the team page. On the team page, you can see that I can select the drop down to change her case manager. Right now, I'm her case manager. And the folks that show up on this list are those users at this school who have a user type that can serve as case managers. So it's not the whole roster of staff members. It is the roster of users that can be that case manager. You can see too, if I want to manage the 504 team, I just toggle over to that. So here are the members of this student's IEP team. We can see her mother is here and Scott McCaskill is also here. If I want to add new team members, I click select the IEP team. And this is where we will be able to get to some other folks. So parents are at the top. If there were more parents in Nicole's record, they would be listed here and I could check or uncheck any of them as necessary to add them or take them off of the IEP team. I will say that every student needs to have at least one parent checked off. You'll see some rules of completion about that if none of those parents appear on any IEP teams or reevaluation teams or those sorts of things. So that's real important to understand. The next section we've got are the staff at my school, the Connecticut Public School that I've been working with who can access that IEP information. So only the people who are staff at that school show in this section. You can see I've got quite a long roster, and as I recall, Martin's going to be on about the 3rd page of this roster. There he is. I click that first column. This is where I'm adding him to the team, and I click save, and now he's there. And I can click save again just to confirm that he's there. Yep. So Martin now has access to get into Nicole's IEP process, to get to see her IEP document, to be able to log and document services as delivered. Until he's on that team, he can't do any of those things. Okay, let me check our notes here real quick and see. I want to pause there just for a second to see if there are any questions about students, users, student search, that sort of thing, before we get into a little bit more advanced problem solving.
Yeah, there was one question, Rob, and I tried to answer it, but I'm not sure that I did it justice. So I'm gonna have you help if you don't mind. So one of the folks on today's session has asked about a contracted service provider that works with just a few of the students in that particular setting in their site. And of course, they only want that particular contractor to kind of be able to work with or get into specific student records. So I did indicate that they should make that person a team member for just those staff or the students
Just that
they
student.
specifically work with, right? But then the follow-up question was, would that contractor then have the ability to kind of add other students to their caseload using one of the caseload wizard tools?
Yeah. So the way, if you were doing it, making sure that this user added themselves to just one student or was added to just one student, this is the way you would manage that and get them in there. Now, I will say that aggregate providers, and maybe this is an area where we need to address permissions and separate out the regular employees that you have versus contracted employees. Aggregate providers can click on tools and then wizards and access this tool called the caseload setup wizard, where they would be able to search for students at their assigned school and then be able to add them to their caseload. And perhaps that's exactly what you want them to be able to do. And perhaps that is based on the contract and the arrangement that you have with that organization, not what you want them to do. If that's the case, and you've got those situations, we should probably have a discussion. The state and all of us and figure out if there's something we need to do to sort of split those people off and not give them access to that tool. But again, that probably has a lot to do with the relationship that you have with that organization, and whether or not you're granting them the ability to access students within the school itself and set them on their caseload, or whether you're going to tightly manage that yourself. Georgette, do you want to lean in on that at all before we move on into the next section? Oh, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was on another call, but what was the question,
Oh,
Rob?
this was a question about contracted staff and how to set them on a student's caseload. And I think there was a little bit of an element in there about maybe we didn't want contracted staff necessarily to set up their own caseloads because of the student privacy or access to students that they shouldn't have access to.
Okay, so that's a toughie. So that's a user type question, but really there's only one user type they can be assigned, the aggregate provider.
Right.
As far as having an account, we did address this in the previous APSEP sessions this week. They can have an account. They can retain their email from their outside firm. As far as your internal protocol, by contract, you probably need to write in certain restrictions on their actions in the system so that they know what they can and cannot do when they're in CT-SEDS. I'm not sure if we, as you said, Rob, go back and rethink some of the user types to allow this, but we'd have to have enough demand for a new user type to do it.
Yeah. And right, we can do that. So it's just, I've noted that. We'll take it under consideration, and perhaps that's something we need to do. If others want that too, let us know. All right, what I want to do is get back to our student.
Can I jump in?
Is there
with
one more question?
There's one more question. I wasn't sure exactly how to answer it. I didn't want to answer incorrectly. Someone had asked about being told that the APSEP could only have one staff member designated as the APSEP administrator. And so I just wanted to throw that out there so that we could get that answered real quick. Thank you.
Yeah, so the department is going to have to think through this for all APSEPs in terms of the impact on granting more than one of those APSEP administrators, but we may have restricted it to that starting way last spring when we started to inquire as to who was going to be assigned which user type. But after today, we will meet internally at the department to debrief on your questions. And this is one of them. Anything to do with user types, we will take back and discuss. But we're already running into the scenarios you all are bringing to us today, that you have an administrator who was the single administrator who had this right, this user type, and now no one has that level of access. So how do you even request someone else be assigned that particular user type? So I get it. We will bring it back. Laura is on. She's hearing this. So as well as Dory. So we are going to address this. We will address it. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So let's get back into it. So the next thing we want to do is get a little bit deeper into student information and understanding a way that you might be able to problem solve some things that are going on with kids when you're trying to do work in the system. So first thing right here is I need to get into the student record once again. I click on her name from my search result. I did it through recent students. You can see up here that I've got Nicole, confirmation too, that she's still in Connecticut Public School, my school. That is always there. We looked at the student information menu real quick, just so that we are all there. There's team where I manage the team. This is where I would go to add new parents if I needed to do that. Many of your districts are actually importing parent information already, so that might be pre-populated for you. The contact log, if you haven't looked at that, I'm not going to demonstrate it today, but that's just a tool, a place where you can document communications that you've had with parents. So an email home, a letter home, a phone call, and you can document that. You can also extract that information as a report and that sort of thing. Totally optional tool. Lots of people find it useful. Next to that are modules. And again, this is where I'm going to find the referral evaluation process, the IEP process, services plan 504. And where I want to draw our attention right now is we're going to go into the admin menu. And in the admin menu, as an aggregate, an APSEP aggregate administrator, I have access to student history. The student history page shows me a quick summary of where this student is in terms of status and compliance. The symbols are right up here. If I span that out, I can see basically her demographic information and understand, sort of what school she's in and that kind of thing. The meat of the place is down here in event history. One of the things that I want to draw your attention to are the events that have these blue stars. And I'm gonna switch over to a slide in a second. But a blue star, let me zoom in just a hair, is something that is indicating that this is the currently valid event. So this is the currently valid IEP. So a question that's come up for in these sessions a little bit was, how can I know, or where do I find this student's finalized IEP in the system? So if there's a finalized IEP in the system, it'll be on the student history page. It'll have a solid blue star, and you can access the document right there by clicking that link. I'll click it right here so you can see. It'll open in another window as a PDF. You can download it, you can print it, you can take it where you need to go. I pointed it out that it popped up in another window. That's important to know. If your computer has pop-ups blocked, you might not see that. So you'll need to enable those for this site. I'm going to switch back to the slides for just a second because I want to put something visual up that helps us sort of really understand this. So this is Nicole's history that we took a snapshot of several weeks ago. And the highlighted items here are steps in the special education process that need to be in a student's history in order. So events in the history are sorted from the most recent event at the top to the oldest event at the bottom when you first look at it. So real logical, student is referred first, then the parent consents to an evaluation, and then after evaluations are completed, the next event would be an eligibility determination. And there's a blue star next to that. So this is the currently valid eligibility determination with the disability noted. There's not one before that. The begin date, the end date of that eligibility is right there too. Then we move on to a student having the parental consent for the provision of services, and finally the IEP. Now, on this screenshot that we took several weeks ago, you can see that Nicole's IEP doesn't have that blue star. That's because at the time that we took this IEP had been finalized in CT-SEDS, but was future dated. And I can see that over here because I can see the IEP was created on October 9th, 2022, but it wasn't set to begin until November 9th, 2022. That means that this IEP was not in effect until November 9th, and therefore doesn't have the currently valid indication here. We've seen this with a few students as we go along, and the way this manifests itself in your context is somebody goes to document services or log services, or perhaps they're trying to do a progress report. And when they get there, the goals that they're expecting to see that they contributed to that are in this IEP don't show up. And the reason they don't show up is because what's going to be in the logging wizard or in the progress report as goals comes from the currently valid IEP. So this one wouldn't pull and be in those places until November 9th. If I jump back out to the system, just to sort of make sure that I follow that all the way through, same student, here's Nicole, same IEP, since today is December 16th, it's very much in effect. And these goals and these services are available in those logging wizards and on that progress report. So that's a real important thing to understand. If you were curious about what this details button is, what this does, and I'll zoom out a little bit so that my windows don't get weird on me. This will show us all of the information that's in that IEP just from the database capture that was done on the day the IEP was created. So you can also get right here and see her participations. This is a weird looking IEP. Down here are the annual goals that are part of that IEP and so forth. So this is another view of that same event. So document available there, event available there. I'm going to pause right here and sort of sidetrack for just a minute and make sure we understand what I mean when I say things like event and document event and that kind of thing. In CT-SEDS, all throughout the system, when you are working in the workspaces, so you're in the IEP module, you're in the referral and evaluation module, you're adding information into the workspace, as we term it. If you want to get a look at what that document is looking like as you go along, you can create a draft at any point in time. It will render a PDF, show what has been written into the system at that point in time, sort of takes a snapshot, gives you the PDF. If you want to add more information, edit it, improve it, and then create another draft, it'll do that, and it'll save that draft right on top of the previous one. So there's only one draft in the system at any time. It's the last time somebody generated that document, took a snapshot of the data that's in the system and put it on a PDF so we could look at it. The final step, after everybody's comfortable with what it says, is generating the final version of the document. When you create a final, does the same kind of thing, takes all the data that's in the database, puts it into the PDF, and it finalizes the event. And that's what shows up on the student history here. So this IEP that's here is captured and saved and documented as the currently valid IEP, meaning if I go back into Nicole's workspace now and start changing the services or updating the goals or that sort of thing, that really is affecting the next IEP, the next time somebody is going to create a new final version of the document. And I think that's a little bit different than the way some of your previous systems work. So if ever you want to know what's on the currently valid IEP, it's on the history page and you can get it right there. If you're adding something or changing things in the IEP workspace, that might be part of the place where you can get a little bit confused about what is the current set of services, what are the current goals that we're working towards. This IEP is the one that is always the current one. Okay, let us check where we're at here. I think we're going to make our dramatic shift over to calendar and management there. So this will be our last call to sort of take any questions that are related to users, students, interplay between those. We are going to talk about progress reporting very specifically right after we do calendars. So save that kind of thing. But this is about students and getting into their information. Anything in the chat team that we should address? Nope.
Nope. I think we're all set.
Last call from anybody that just wants to chime in. Okay, let's shift gears. All right, so we're going to go back to the home page, get out of Nicole's record entirely. I'm going to click home. And you'll see that my white menu bar is all cleared up. I don't have a student there any longer. I am back at the beginning of the system. I'm going to scroll out just a hair. Calendar management. Now, I think a lot of you are aware of this, and as we start this, we are also aware of the challenge that APSEPs have, that your school, your building, your site exists in multiple different district sites. And therefore, what I'm about to demonstrate and speak to about calendar management does need to be done on each of those sites. Now, we are committed to that not being the case forever. We're working right now on ways where you are going to be able to manage or populate your calendar one time and push that out to all of the sites. That unfortunately isn't available today, but it is something that's a high priority. We've heard you and we want to make that work really well. For today, what I'm about to demonstrate is the way that it needs to be done for the time being. But hopefully through this, you'll see that maybe there's not as much that you need to do. All right, so let's look at calendars. The way we get to the calendar is clicking admin, and then it's really tempting to click district calendar when you see it right there. If you do that, what you're going to see is the calendar that manages the whole site and all of the schools within it. You don't want to manage that calendar. You want to manage your school's calendar. The relationship between these two, just so we understand it, is that if the district is set up the beginning of the school year, when the holiday break is and all that sort of thing, that's populated on school calendars, and then you can further customize that. So let's just look at these real quick. If I click district calendar, you'll see I'm modifying, I'm in my PCG training site, I'm modifying the PCG training calendar. To get to my school's calendar, I'm going to go admin and then click schools instead of district calendar. Here's the roster of schools, and right there is my school's calendar. Now this looks exactly the same as the one we were just looking at, but I'm in my PCG training site, so this is the district name, and I'm managing my school's calendar. That says Connecticut Public School that I was working with a little while ago. Okay, so it's a subtle change there, but it's really important that you understand you're under admin, schools, click on your school calendar, and then you're going to start managing the calendar. Now, I've reset this and cleaned it up a whole bunch so that we can look at it from its default perspective. School calendars and district calendars, when you first go into them, all of the weekdays are set as yellow and the weekends are set as gray. To understand what's going on with those, we go down here to the calendar legend, and yellow days are school days. So it's real important that we sort of do a little bit of grooming on this, because not every one of those days is a school day. If you look at the asterisk right next to that, this is set up. So what the system is recognizing that a day of this kind of type is one where services can be provided. What that means is that a provider could document a service as having been delivered on that day because school was in session, kids were in the building, providers were there in the building. Or if you look at snow day, perhaps you had a virtual day, and it's possible, according to policy that you've got, that you could deliver services virtually, and maybe that's the way things happen on that day. However, if we don't set some days to be days where there is no school in session, you could have a situation where somebody accidentally documented a service as delivered, and on a day that couldn't have been possible. So this is December. We're looking at the last week of December, and clearly these are not all school days. So if I want to change one of these days to, let's change it to a holiday, I would click the day, and I'll zoom out so this is not looking so strange. There you go. And right at the top, you can see pretty clearly that the way the school district has this set up is as a school day. For my current school, I can set this as a holiday. So the scenario here might be the school has one of your days set up as a teacher work day, but it's a day where your building is in session. You don't have a teacher work day. You could come right in and switch it from whatever they had set it as and then change it to a regular school day. So let's say that I want to call it or give it a name so it doesn't just say holiday, and I'm going to say this day is a winter break day. If I come right down and update the database, you will see that now this day is a different day type, no asterisks, it's purple, or not purple, pink. I'm colorblind, that really helps. And this is now a day where services can't be logged. If I want to set a whole range of days at once, because this is a pain in the neck doing one at a time, I could click the first day of the range. I could change it to the day that I want. Let's change it to winter break again. And I could use this section down in the middle where I can set a range of dates. Now this is pretty specific written description, but the long and short of it is you need to put in the dates as month, day, year, and then a hyphen to the end of that range. The other part that it's telling you in here is you need to be careful that if you want to do like a 2-week period, you're going to want to sort of do Monday through Friday, comma, and then put in the dates for Monday through Friday again, and so on. Because if you don't, you're going to mark all the weekend days as whatever day type you're setting up here, and then have to undo that. So I'm going to set that whole week as winter break. And now when I update the database, you can see that this whole week is winter break. I haven't changed the district calendar. They're going to go to school all that week, but we're going to be off on winter break. And so that's how you would set up those day types. Now, there's a little bit more we can do with customizing your calendar and making it different from everybody else's. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that we can see this and make sure I just have my slide handy because I might want to show that. Okay. We're going to go and edit reporting periods. So at the bottom of the screen, we're going to click Edit School Years. At the top, before I scroll down, you can see I've got columns for school year. This column you see only on your school calendar site, where I can add a custom calendar. I'll speak to that in just a moment. The begin date and end date that's in the system. So somebody set up, this is the first day of school, this is the last day of school. And then these columns over here tell me how many calendar days are between the begin and end date that are set, and how many school days exist. So how many of those days are yellow and have that school day designation. Now this first year back in 1997, nobody has touched, and that's why it looks that way. There are a lot of years of historic data, old calendars that are in the system. The reason those need to be there is because students have history. And so you need to have those previous year calendars in there. We'll probably do some cleanup so this list isn't quite so long, but that's important. Don't go inactivating or deleting those calendars if you have that ability. Down here at the bottom, you'll see this is our current school year. So 2022 to 23. And you can see that we have created a custom calendar. If I want to add a custom calendar, let's say for next year, so these are the dates that the school district has in there, but I want to get started on setting our calendar up next year, I'd click Add Custom. I would click Update the Database. And now when you scroll down, I can edit the first day of school, the last day of school, and change all of that. If I want to get rid of that and just go back and work and return it to the way it was with the school district, I just click Delete the custom calendar. I click Update the Database, and now that next school year is all set up to just inherit whatever the district had put on there. So that's how that custom works. But from here, literally, I can start to put in, this is our first day of school, this is our last day of school. That will change, just to sort of draw that out. If I change this down to, let's say we're going to get out on the 20th of June, we'll change the number of days between September 1st and June 20th. And then correspondingly, this is showing me the number of school days. So as you work to sort of customize your calendar, you can check this number right here. You know how many school days you're in session. This will give you a number that tells you exactly how many days on the calendar you've got set as a school day. All right, so I've customized that a bit. Let's look over at these two columns. So I'm going to deal with this report periods column very specifically today. So on our calendar, we can designate when specific progress reports need to occur, or what their names are, and that sort of thing. So we'd come into the calendar, and actually somebody asked this yesterday. Let me show you how I got here once again. So admin, and then I click schools, and I click calendar. So now I'm editing my school's calendar, and I come down to click edit years, and I'm at that page where I can start managing the reporting period. So reporting period is the last column. I scroll down to my custom year that I'm currently working with, and I click edit. Now, out of the box, the system has 4 reporting periods that say reporting period 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll also see that I have the ability to edit these things and change their names as much as I want. So I can switch this over to say December and call that. I could call this one progress report. Oops. And depending on whatever your current naming convention is for progress reporting, you could rename these things however you want. If you want to add more, you would just simply click add another reporting period, and you can keep adding reporting periods. I have seen plenty of schools that just set these up month by month and have one for every month of the school year. They might have 9, they might, depending on the kind of building, it might even be a 12-month list of months. So you have a lot of freedom for how you want to sort of arrange the reporting periods, how many you want to have, what you want to call them. What we're doing here when I edit this is what users are going to see when they go to do a progress report and they select the drop-down menu for which period, which progress report period am I doing. It's going to say what I write here. The next couple of columns here are about setting begin and end dates and due dates. Some folks want to manage progress reports so that, you know, reporting period 1 happens at the beginning of the year between these 2 dates and has to be completed by that date. Reporting period 2 happens between these 2 dates and must be completed by that date. If you want to manage yours that way, you can use these dates to set that up, and that will further refine sort of what people see in that dropdown on any given day of the year. So you won't be able to see reporting period 1 when you're at the end of the year because it doesn't sit between those 2 dates. A lot of folks, I think, tend to not want to do it that way. That if you writing progress reports according to a student's progress through an IEP. So a student gets 1 progress report, the 2nd progress report, maybe the 3rd. You want people to access that at any given time during the year because these students are midway through and need progress report 2 done. That in that scenario, you would not make use of these dates at all. Okay. Last thing I want to notice here is that at the top, just to confirm, I am editing custom reporting periods for my school building. If I wanted to go right back to the way the school district did it, I've got a button down here where I could revert to the progress report periods of the district, and you'll see that now I can't edit it. What my users are going to see is what the district entered on their progress reports. I can click customize, and now I'm back into a place where I can customize my own. So I'm going to go ahead and change this one to December again. There we go. And click update the database. All right, so now that's saved. Okay, so I can rename them any way I want to rename them. I can add more of them as necessary, and then that's going to allow me to see that in the progress report itself. Before I roll into talking about progress reporting, I want to pause for a second and see if we have any questions about what I just showed around the calendar or any details about what's coming up. I see we're nodding head, and I also see 31 questions in the chat. So let's do it.
So I think I was able to answer most of them. One of the ones that I wanted to leave for us to discuss is someone has asked about their school running for a full year, and can their start and end dates kind of encompass that? And if not, how do they then account for the dates for ESY services?
Yeah, so if your school sort of had, if you're running year round, let me take that part first. So go to admin, go to schools, click on my school, and then go into my edit school years. And this is where I can create my custom calendar, and I could make this year round. So whatever you would consider your first day of school, you would populate there, and whatever you consider your last day of school would populate there. It could be 365 days, you know, July 1 to June 30, and you can work that way. So by using this custom calendar, that's how you can make your calendar different than the school districts and have it go year round. Now, ESY periods I didn't talk about today, but it is explained in the quick guide for customizing school calendars, is the similar kind of thing that we did with reporting periods. It's this second column. I'll look at it really quick. I click the edit button, and here I've got the district's summer break is set up, and it's set as ESY to go from July 5th through July 28th. Now, if I wanted to customize that and make, because ours is different than the school districts, I would click customize, and then now I can change this and change those dates, or I can add another ESY period. Perhaps we do, session 1 and session 2, however it is that you might organize it. You can set this up custom for your organization that will sort of not be the same as the school districts if you choose to customize it that way. All right.
Okay.
Any other question?
There was one more question. So they set up their calendar.
Yep.
And they marked a day as being a professional development day. And now that has changed, and they need that day to be reflected back as a school day. And there's having a little bit of a kerfuffle on trying to get that back. So could you go over that?
Yeah,
Can I clarify?
Yes, please.
So the normal district calendar might have a day marked as no school because they have professional development that day, but our school is running regular school. And so when I go in to change it, I can obviously change it back to a school day. That part's no issue. But then where you can label it, they have that label as professional development, and I can't delete their label.
Yeah.
I can change what the school day is, but I can't change the label.
Yeah, let me illustrate that real specifically. So for everybody, what I did is I'm on the admin menu. I've clicked on the district calendar. So I'm going to real quick set today for the district. Oh, wait, Pablo can't edit the district calendar. Sorry. So let's just imagine for a second. I'm on my Connecticut schools calendar. Let's imagine that this is the day I want to change. Actually, let's take this one because this was set. This is coming from the district calendar. You should be able to click this day if it's professional day and come in and edit it by clicking what you need it to be. So school day, and then giving it its label and confirming that. And when you click update the database, it would say that exactly what you wrote there. So you should be able to override what the school district did. If that's not working for you and it didn't work as simply as that, what I would ask is that you put in a help desk ticket and tell us exactly which district you're on, and we'll go in and look at it. And the reason that I want to do that is because I have seen some instances where this has gotten a little bit jumbled up, and the system is a little tangled up between custom and not custom. So we can look at it more closely for you. If that didn't work that simply, then let us know. Okay. Anything else?
I think
calendar
we're all
wise?
set. Nope.
Okay.
I was able to answer everything else. So.
All right. Before we get to, where we're going to go next is progress reports. So zoom back out. We'll shift back to our friend Nicole. So get out of the calendar entirely. I click home. I'm back here. To find Nicole again, I'm going to go to recent students, and I'm going to jump in and I'm going to look at Nicole. Now, Nicole needs a progress report done. Before I go too deep in this, there are actually two ways that progress reporting can get done. One of the ways, and the way I'm going to demonstrate to start with, is using a thing called the Progress Report Wizard. This is a tool that allows a user who has a caseload, and Pablo has a caseload. He can come in, look at his roster of kids, and then complete progress reports for them one at a time. And when he's done, have the whole set completed or have the whole set drafted or what have you. So that it's kind of an efficient process. He can identify the kids that he wants to work with, work through them one at a time, and just move on to the next one, move on to the next one. And when he's all done, they're all there. So it's less clicks and pretty efficient for somebody to do progress reporting for that group of kids that they want to address. The other way, and we will look at this, is to do a one-off, just a progress report for this particular student. That's possible too through the create and view documents page. And we will look at that before we're all done. So let's start with the progress report wizard. So here's Pablo. We're looking at Nicole. He didn't even have to find Nicole to start with. He could be on the home page. He's going to click tools and then wizards. And the first wizard at the top of his list is progress report. When I click progress report, I'm going to get a roster of my students that are on my caseload, and they're all checked at the moment. I'm going to switch that over to check none. Maybe what I'm doing is, the second period progress report for my students, and I do these according to where a kid is in their IEP. So only Nicole and maybe Miranda are in that situation right now. And so I identify my 2 students. If I accidentally identified, let me just add one more to that list. Let's say I had one and I thought I was going to do it. I can get rid of that later. So now I select my progress report period. Now I want to be plain for everybody. I just explained when I was talking about the calendars that you could customize the name of these reporting periods. I renamed the first one December and it's not showing here. We identified this yesterday, verified it that you guys are seeing it too. This is a bug. We're working to get that fixed and have given that to developers because that should say December because I customized it. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to get started. I have to choose, actually, I said that I was doing reporting period 2. So I'm going to click reporting period 2. I'm going to choose my roster of kids. And when I click continue, what will happen is it will start stepping me through each child. So I know who I'm working with because the name of the student is right here. What appears next is the progress report period that I'm actually completing. And then this is student 1 of 3. So I know sort of where I am in the progress. If this was a student that I didn't want to do or whatever, I can skip this student. And I'm actually going to do that right now because you can see that her goals are kind of not good looking. And it takes me to Nicole's. So I didn't do anything. I didn't create a draft. I didn't touch that student in any way. I just skipped her. So now I've got Nicole, reporting period 2, she's student 2 of 3. So I can navigate through my roster that way. When I look specifically at the progress report workspace, a couple of things are going on that I want to draw your attention to. First off, the current goal that's in her currently valid IEP automatically comes in here. Okay, and this obviously is not a well-written goal, but this is what it said in her demonstration IEP that somebody did. So whatever somebody wrote in as the goal shows up here. I can use the drop-down to identify where she is from a progress standpoint, and I can type a much better narrative note than what I did yesterday here. I want to draw your attention to the fact that this is a text box that expands with you as you add content. It's got a spell checker. It's not as good as Word, but it does a pretty decent job. You can copy and paste text into this, but I will also be plain that if you're somebody who really makes some fancy bullets and formats your text a whole lot, pasting it in here, it might lose a bunch of that. So sometimes it's efficient just to type the paragraphs and paste them in here and then do the bulleting or the formatting within this. You can see, and this is where we're supporting the idea of a user, multiple different users contributing to a progress report for a student. The last person that updated this workspace was actually me yesterday, shortly before noon. And this is captured in the system. When I make a change to it, so let's say that, oh, shoot, this should have been capitalized. And I just go ahead and I say, just update the database. That's now updated that I'm the last person that touched this. So it doesn't tell me if somebody else is here at the same time. There could be a warning. You've probably seen it up at the top of the screen when two people are on the same page at the same time. But the last person that saved anything is shown right here. This is one of those things that if you come in here and you look at this and this was just recently saved by your colleague, you might want to skip this student and come back, because what you don't want to do is have two people writing and then one saves and the other saves and somebody gets their stuff lost. I know that's not exactly what people want to see, but the only time that you're going to run into that conflict is if you're actually trying to both edit the same text box at nearly exactly the same time, where you're going to create a conflict and it doesn't work out. So pay attention to looking at who the last person was that came through. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. It's been adjusting dynamically, and so our objective got a little jumbled, but the objectives that came in from attached to that goal also are shown here. And for these, I can change the status and say there's not been any progress to date. And in my note, you can probably just barely see that it says have not started. As I move over here, I have the opportunity, if I want to, or if my objective was written in a way that was very quantitative, I could provide a number and a current level and a target. A couple of things about this, and they're known issues that we're looking into right now. The system is not accepting a current level that is higher than the target. We're looking to address that. And the other thing that I have heard tell of is that current level, I think, is not accepting zeros. And so you need, that is a change that we're working to make. You might need to put a number in there, and it might not be correct. For the time being, go ahead and leave it blank. If that's giving you a big problem, we're working to clean it up. Percentage works similar kind of way, but now what you're going to do is put numbers in here and it'll display as a percentage. And again, that's optional to use, but if your objective is quantitative, you're going to want to use that. If this isn't working for you because you need to put in a 0 or a current level that's higher than the target, you can do that using the narrative box here and explain it. So the parent will get that communication. That's your current workaround, and you should see a change happening there pretty soon. So I work through all of this. I get my information updated and I'm working through the progress report wizard. I can just save and move on to my next student. That's what update and move to next student does. If at the end of this, what I want to have is draft documents from each one of these kids, because I want to sort of have that PDF. I want to be able to look at it, read it through, make sure it says what I wanted it to say. I can click create a draft progress report and move to the next student. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I'll speak to the Portuguese functionality you're seeing there in a little while. So I didn't get my PDF immediately. I'll get that at the end when I get through all of my students. So here's Miranda. I'm on report period 2 still, 3rd student. You can see her goals came in here. And again, this is another test student where it looks like nobody's written too much. I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to create a draft of this. Let's pretend that it's well written. And I want to look at that next, just so we can get to the end. Now you can see I have my 3 students that were part of my batch, and I've got progress report drafts for them. Actually, Mark was from yesterday, this last student here. And these are the documents that I've created drafts of in the progress report wizard. If I wanted to just take them one at a time, I would uncheck these batch things and I could click this to view the draft document right here. I can download it, I can print it, I can take it wherever I need to go, right? If I wanted to take all of these as one big long PDF, that's what this batch column does. And I can click view document batch. And what that's going to do is take all of those progress reports, put them in one packet of PDF, and I'd be able to sort of print that, save that, and have that as a document I could look at. And again, these are all over here as draft status at this point in time. So I'm essentially done. Get my draft, get my progress reports, and I've completed everything, and I'm out of here. So now let's say that all of the members of Nicole's team have come in and completed the draft progress report. And the scenario is now I, as an administrator, or I, as the student team leader, or what have you, I'm going to come through, check out everybody's work and finalize that. I could do that through the progress report wizard, but I could also just do it by looking up my student and going straight to her record and going to the create view documents page. So let's get there. So we go to Nicole. And to get to create and view documents, I go to the admin page or menu, and I click create view documents. This is that document repository I spoke of before. Every document that's been created in the system for Nicole is listed down here, along with, and you will probably see a lot of these things, uploaded documents that came from the previous IEP system that were imported at the start of the CT-SEDS implementation. The draft progress report that I just created is over here as a draft document, and I can get in there and I can see that PDF once again. So if I want to finalize it, I would click into the progress report and then click create final and save it. So let me go ahead and do that. I select the reporting period. So I click progress report, the reporting period. Now this is what I was talking about. It works correctly here. I'm getting December as the dropdown. We just need to get December to show in the progress report wizard. If you'll recall, I actually did work in her reporting period 2 workspace. So when I click that and I click create final, I will see exactly the same workspace that I saw when I was in the wizard. So everything that the other users saved is here. I have the ability to edit it and change it if I need to do that. If everything is fine, I can click create the final progress report. And I think this one will clear all the rules of completion. It did not. So that's my fault for not having it set up correctly. But the creating the final progress report would have shown right there as having the clear box, and you would know it was final. The other way you could know if it's final, and this is real important, this is a draft progress report. It won't show in the student history. A finalized progress report will show on the student history page. That's where I would go back to admin student history. The typical student history would show, here's an IEP, and then you'd see probably 3 or 4 progress reports above it as they progress through the IEP. So the rhythm on the student history page is often consent for the provision of services, IEP, progress report, progress report, progress report, next IEP. Okay. So a little bit of a fumble on there. Nicole's progress report wasn't quite ready to be finalized, and I wasn't able to do it there. Let me check my notes and see if there was anything else I needed to do there. We got just enough time to do this. Let's go back to her progress report for a second, because I'll go ahead and demonstrate translation. So I go to create and view documents. So that I don't hit rules of completion, I'm going to click progress report and I'm going to click create draft. Let's do reporting period 2 again, create draft. Down at the bottom, students who are set up to have translated documents available on the pages where you're creating the draft or final version of the document will be a checkbox like this that'll say include a translated version of this document. It's not checked by default. The reason for that is that you can sort of work with this, create the English version, and if you want to create a translated version, you opt into doing that. So I check that box, and when I click create draft progress report, what's going to happen now is that in about the same amount of time it took me to generate the one in English, I'm going to generate 2 versions of the progress report. One is in English, and it's the first one. The second one is pretty clearly notated as being translated into Portuguese. It translated the whole document from beginning to end into that language. It doesn't have a form in the background that does that. And a couple of things about this. If you do this and notice that that translation isn't perfect, it isn't exactly what we want, please send us a ticket through the the help desk system and let us know. This is an AI tool. So tell us the name of the student, tell us the document you're working with, tell us the phrase or the words that aren't correct. And we have the ability to go in and teach the system that when it sees these words, translate it this way. I'll also say that this AI engine is working across all of our clients all across the country. So you're already the beneficiaries of a lot of people helping it learn languages like Spanish in terms of our education language, our special education language, but that doesn't mean it's perfect for Connecticut's terminology. So you will find some of those things. Please send those in as a help desk ticket and we'll get that taken care of. The other thing that I'll show you on the translated version of the document is that there's a footer on the bottom of all of those that does indicate that if there's a question about the translation or a problem with it, the legal document or the correct document, the one that is the authoritative document, is the one that's written in English, and this is a companion document to that. So going back to the student for a second, if I go to the documents page, you'll see that now that I created that draft, there's two rows. This is the progress report in English. This is the progress report in Portuguese. If it were finalized on the student history page, both of these documents would appear there. They will forever be linked as a pair in the system when you create a translated document. Last bit about translation is what drives that. How does it know that the student needs a translated document? Or if you're aware of a student who does need a translated document, this is where you would go to check that. On the student history page, or sorry, on the student personal information page, right in the middle of the screen when you land on it is this field called document language. Now you'll see Pablo doesn't have the ability to edit document language here, but the district staff do. And this is one of those things that if you come aware of a family that needs a document translated, you can suggest that to the district. Somebody can come in here, set that, and from the minute they set that, everywhere else in the system where you create a document that can be translated, that language will be available. There are 10 languages on this list that include Portuguese, as you're looking at Spanish and Albanian and a few others. We'll get you that list. And it's pretty quick and immediate to set that up. All right, I'm going to pause just for a second and see if there are questions. And there is one more thing that I want to hand it over to Georgette to complete before we wrap up today. But on translations, on progress reports, any questions at all that we can answer here?
So there's a little bit of a complex question.
Okay.
Linda Carlson has asked, but it's a very good one that we do need to address.
All right.
And that is that by student, in the system where it says first reporting period, what do we mean by that? And how does that align with, so a student whose annual review, so again, using kind of the different constructs, is the first reporting period the one that comes after an annual review, or is it what the APSEP designates by, quarters? So, is it just like taking the school year and splitting it up by the number of reporting periods? So the question she asks is, if one student has an annual review in December and the first reporting period on their IEP is in January, whereas another student has an annual review in March, but their first reporting period is in June, what do we mean by first reporting period in CT-SEDS? And how does that play out for the students on the different progress reporting schedules, if you will?
Yeah, if you're seeing the terminology first reporting period, I would bet you're looking at district language that they might have set on this page that I'm on, where I customize the reporting period names, because first reporting period is not language that's pre-programmed into the system. So that's first thing. But I came here real quick and you noticed I'm editing the Connecticut schools. So this is me modifying my school's reporting periods. I can come in here and change it to what I need it to be. And again, if I can edit this, I'm working on my custom one. If I click revert and it's not an editable screen, I'm looking at what the district said. So that might be your issue with that. But the idea is that if I don't have any dates set in here, these two things are going to show up on my dropdown for progress reports. So I'm going to update the database, and I'm going to jump back into Nicole and go to create and view document, just so we can get here quick and see our dropdown progress report draft. On my dropdown, now I've got first quarter, second quarter. And this is what I was talking about before. For any set of students, my students might have recently have had their new IEP written in CT-SEDS. They're a quarter into that IEP, and I could do the first quarter progress report by selecting that there. My next student might be further along in that progress, and I might instead for them do a second quarter report. And so this really is, the system's not trying to box you into something, it's trying to support you in whatever your organization's methodology is for naming and organizing how you do progress reports.
I think the department is going to have to provide some clarification and guidance to everyone around this, because if you look right above that reporting period box, it specifies the school year. So again, I think that the intent originally was breaking up that school year into quarters. So if the first time you're issuing a report is January, that's going to be your second quarter reporting, not your first quarter reporting, because most districts align the progress reports to the report card intervals.
Yep, and
So
that's also a very valid way to do it, and name them exactly that way. Yep.
So I mean, I'm not sure that we intended it to be done in just one way, but I think as we're learning with all of you and, you know, the different permutations of this, we will probably have to do some follow-up guidance for next year, not this year, as we see how the various districts, APSEPs, magnets, charters use this, and what the misalignments are within the progress reporting process. So for now, I think we're all working through it together. So, but I have made a note of this, and we will as a team internally go back and think through this as well in terms of clearer guidance on how you set your reporting periods. The other questions, well, if we could just move into my slides, Rob, and then we can circle
that's
back
where
to
I was
the
headed
remaining
next.
questions.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So let me go ahead and
Because I think the slides I'm about to share with you are going to address some of the questions that folks have asked in the chat.
Yep. Just give me one moment to get there. Progress reports, we just did all of that. There you go.
So what we want to just say for this major transition year to everyone, not just APSEPs, is that what we hope will happen across all the various entities that are now part of this CT-SEDS system, whether it's, you know, state agencies, APSEPs, charters, magnets, RESCs, and then of course the public school districts, is that we hope everyone is going to really have a collaborative working relationship on delineating what your various roles and responsibilities are within the system. We know that some of you have hit some bumps with districts. Some districts are asking some APSEPs to do one thing, and other districts are asking APSEPs to do another thing. So we are making note of all of this. But it is important for you to know that this system was designed to support the LEAs that own the IEPs. So they own the IEPs, they are the OSEP district, you are part of their site, which is why you don't have your own independent site. And I don't know if Rob already mentioned this, so forgive me if I'm repeating something he already said, but We also are noting all the concerns you have had around calendars and how you list all your students across district. Is there a way to do that where you can go in to a master list rather than having to go into individual sites? So we are very aware of kind of some of the challenges that you all are facing. You know, some of you are very small programs, some of you are larger, but we understand kind of as we make it through this first year and learn how you are utilizing the system, what challenges it's presenting, you know, some of the ways that we can streamline these processes for you. But know that ultimately you are supporting the district's implementation of the IEP. So the questions that I've seen in chat relate to the next slide, which has to do with who does what and who's responsible for what. So this is probably the easiest way that we can kind of outline this for you in terms of the LEA's responsibility to finalize. So someone in the chat asked who can finalize. So between the user types chart, and if you go back to those user type charts, you'll see in some of that and some of those columns who can finalize what. Well, the APSEPs cannot finalize meeting notice, prior written notice, consents, record of meeting, eligibility determination, or the IEP. So those are out of your hands. You are simply drafting components or drafting pieces predominantly of the IEP. You're probably not even going to touch the other pieces on this list. But you will have a role. So if there's a student going through diagnostic placement, referral and eval, and they happen to be placed at the APSEP, you will have some components of that process that it entails data that only you can enter into the system. But even some of you have worked out ways to share data with the district and have them enter. I know I'm also working with the Board of Education Services for the Blind, and they are predominantly aggregate providers. So they are providing data to the districts rather than entering it themselves as we work through this year. So again, we are going to study what's going on with your activities as you collaborate with the districts. But right now, these are strictly the responsibility of the LEA to finalize. Going into other components of what you can do. If you could go to the next slide, Rob. Okay, is there another one after that? Okay, I'm forgetting if there is.
No,
I don't think
that's
there
it.
is.
You're
Okay.
on to your
So
work of art here.
What? Yeah, my work.
This is beautiful.
My masterpiece. Thank you. So we have developed some flow charts for everyone, but this predominantly is for the districts. And again, components of this. So for example, students who are, and depending on where they are in their transition to or from an APSEP, you will be providing or data entering into the IEP module, present levels possibly, if you've had the student long enough to be able to enter information around present levels, certainly goals and objectives as they relate to what instruction, academic or functional, that the APSEP is providing, supplementary aids and services, related services, special ed services, so forth. So those are kind of the main components of the IEP that the APSEP staff will inform and most likely enter into the system. Relating back to one of the earlier questions about can two people go in at the same time? And I think Rob said, yes, but we will provide you warnings when you're trying to get into the same panel at the same time. That can cause some real issues of overwriting each other. So again, something we're working through this year, but predominantly in terms of which modules, which processes you will be involved in, it's going to be mostly the IEP module and process. But certainly some of the students with either diagnostic placements, maybe in the initial referral and eval process, you may have, you will be part of the IEP team as well as supporting the district at that level when they're doing initial referral and eval. Other than that, I think, again, we will probably continue to provide more informational sessions to you. We have yet to put out a final plan on how we'll do that from January through June, but we are mindful that there's still a lot more information we want to walk through with you, amendments, technical amendments, so on and so forth, restraints and seclusions. So there's a lot more topical information that we would like to present to you.